Today, the focus shall be upon one Tobe Hooper and his last film worth anything, 1990's Spontaneous Combustion. By this time in history, Hooper had drained his reputation. Hollywood was ignoring him seemingly entirely, and his 3 films prior to this had been produced with Canon Films. He was gifted the good fortune to helm Spontaneous Combustion, co-writing the screenplay with one Howard Goldberg and eliciting the help of 5 different individual producers. So Spontaneous Combustion is a kind of homage to the typical 1950s sci-fi horror bash. Actually, I might sooner describe it as a deliberate bridge between those aforementioned 50s affairs and the more contemporary 1980s genre romps, which served as a revival somewhat of such pictures. The narrative begins in the 1950s, actually, during a rather nefarious experiment, a nuclear experiment, I believe, being conducted on a married couple, the wife pregnant with child. Upon the child's birth, under military supervision, the parent spontaneously combust, incinerated by mysterious flaming bursts. The orphaned child survives. As an adult, this child, portrayed with genuine camp passion by the always fun Brad Dourif, begins to discover he has the spectacular power of pyrokinesis. And so Spontaneous Combustion becomes the story of a failed experiment who escapes and sort of just ends up going around killing a bunch of people. Much like the 1950s and 60s films it is indebted to. Immediately downstream from the 1980s, however, it is concurrently one of these special effects experiments, a quaint body horror ball. It is coloured extensively with that vivid, often unrealistic, saturated, stylized lighting common with that decade's film interiors. The tone of this film harkens decades back to the era of The Fly, 4D Man, The Most Dangerous Man Alive, or The Projected Man. It also firmly belongs to a wave of 1980s non-slasher Monster Man films, including The Sender, Stuart Gordon's early work, Cronenberg's Fly, well, Cronenberg in general perhaps, and Hooper's own Life Force. Invaders from Mars was another attempt by Tobe Hooper to harpoon 1950s genre pictures, although he failed to build a bridge of anything relevant or contemporary to the 1980s, and the film in general, certainly compared to Spontaneous Combustion or the preceding and slightly similarly intentioned Life Force, feels devoid of a particular passion. It smells distinctly cynical. Spontaneous Combustion contains some of Hooper's better filmmaking in general. The standout sequence, perhaps due to its fierce unpredictability so early in the film's narrative, is the scene of the parents' combustion. They ignite, the edits dance smartly around the action, throwing in appropriate reaction shots where necessary, the music drowns out the sound effects, and burnt bodies collapse on one another in loving embrace. You must see it for yourselves, you truly must. The interior design in general is very inspired. I've mentioned the effective lighting that colours the production of the film's interiors, but Hooper's imagination was on fire. Bizarre props scatter the decor of Brad Dourif's apartment, glowing telephones, strange sculptures, and fascinating unclear, unused, transparent gadgets. You may witness some of these odd home objects in the presented screen caps I have included here. Perhaps remembered as a minimalist due to his recognised masterpiece Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hooper's technical skill had been thoroughly evident by the time Salem's Lot was airing, and certainly segments of 1979's The Dark can't have been directed by the hapless John Bud-Cardos, most famous for William Shatner's natural horror picture Kingdom of the Spiders. Funhouse is a generic bandwagon slasher. I don't care what any fake opinion claims, but its technical filmmaking is far, far above its similarly mediocre peers. And even more notable than, in my opinion, the filmmaking is technically superior to what I would consider overall better slashers, such as The Burning, The Silent Scream, Night School, Curtains, Sleepaway Camp, Visiting Hours, The House on Sorority Row, or The Dorm That Dripped Blood. Yeah, I can nominate unsung slashers as well, and you don't have to resort to mediocre crap like The Prom Night, My Bloody Valentine, or The Funhouse, you damned internet publications. God. Anyway, Poltergeist, by many accounts, was helmed by Spielberg, so Hooper could attend to a cocaine addiction, and I'll be honest, I don't like Poltergeist all that much either. It was in Life Force then, when Tobe Hooper's technical prowess was truly most on display. That film, along with several other Hooper pieces, deserves to be film of the day in and of itself sometime, and so I will choose not to go into it heavily here, for the sake of not repeating myself in the future. Tobe Hooper certainly has a bizarre filmography, beginning with the beautiful pathos of Eggshells and continuing with my favourite American film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, I say it's my favourite American film to mildly stun people, really, but it actually probably is, all things considered. Mind you, this isn't to say it is my favourite film made by an American, because many of Orson Welles' films were shot outside of America, namely Chimes at Midnight. Hooper followed with the underwatched masterpiece Eaten Alive, and then with Salem's Lot and A Firing from the Dark, both worth a watch, I think. Salem's Lot in particular may be my favourite King adaptation along with Kubrick's The Shining. Obviously I wasn't overly fond of Funhouse or Poltergeist, but Life Force and then Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 were both outstanding in my opinion. I won't get into the brilliance of Texas Chainsaw 2 just today, but let's just say we could have used more Hooper and Hopper at the cinemas. Oh yes indeed. Invaders from Mars ended the canon trilogy, and then Spontaneous Combustion marked the end of quality Tobe Hooper films. I urge you not to subject yourselves to the likes of Body Bags, The Mangler, Crocodile, Toolbox Murders, or Mortuary. I had to turn off his final film, 2013's Gin, because I was feeling extremely depressed. I was only 24 minutes into the film, for goodness sake. Nevertheless, Tobe Hooper needs more love and respect outside of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Spontaneous Combustion, I think, ought to be considered one of his career highlights for certain. Unfortunately, there is not much in the way of scholarship on the film, which I could immediately access. There is a horribly overwritten AV Club article, but that's nothing new for those parasites, on this film, which you should avoid like the plague. Instead, watch the film, dim the lights, and you'll be guaranteed some juicy 90-minute joy. Rest well, Tobe Hooper.